Well, I just want to start off by saying Transition New Port Richey started about in 2008 when I started Co-Green Community. I learned about the transition movement and I wanted to start one up here. So these are our two different websites that we have. We have one group website on Co-Green Community, and we also have a meetup.com. I started that up trying to get more people involved. And I think, having just a strictly group just for our group would be helpful too. Because Co-Green Community is more for all Tampa Bay, and I want to focus strictly on New Port Richey today and talk about what we've been doing. So this is our overview. I'm going to talk a little bit very shortly about the situation that we're in. Then I want to go on about what is Transition New Port Richey, how we can create resilient, sustainable communities, relocalization, a little bit about permaculture and what we've been up to the past year and a half, and what we would like to do from here. So the situation, right now it seems like all the problems in the world, they just keep adding up and they're adding up and they keep on becoming more and more complex, whether it's energy or the economy or this or that. But really, all the solutions that we need are embarrassingly simple. So one of the biggest things that I foresee is the energy transition that we're undergoing. The challenges of global climate change kind of give us the necessity to move away from fossil fuels. And then peak oil talks about how it's inevitable that we will be moving away from fossil fuels, and this energy transition is occurring over the next 10, 20 years. This is not going to be a short thing, it's going to be something that we're going to be living through. And then what both of these try and tell us is that the only way forward is for us to be proactive and engage in this and really look at how we can reduce our fossil fuel use. And transition initiatives give us a way of doing that as a community. So what is Transition New Port Richey? It started by me reading this book, The Transition Handbook, written by Rob Hopkins, who started Transition Town Totnes, which is in the United Kingdom. And he is a permaculture designer that he was showing to his students the end of suburbia. And he was trying to wonder how you could use permaculture to kind of work as a community towards transitioning away from fossil fuels. And he developed this handbook. And it's a grassroots movement. It's all over the globe right now. There's one probably the next local transition group is in Sarasota, and there are other groups that are trying to form. There's one in Clearwater. I know a gentleman that's trying to start one. There's one in Tampa. There's a discussion group in Seminole. I'm trying to eke them towards going towards a transition group. There's other groups that are trying to form as well that are interested in this. So I feel that if we can focus on getting Transition New Port Richey, we can kind of show them how they can do it in their towns. So this is Rob Hopkins' quote. I'll just kind of read it. I believe that a low-energy, more localized future in which we move from being consumers to being producer-consumers, where food, energy, and other essentials are locally produced, local economies are strengthened, and we have learned to live more within our means, is a step towards something extraordinary, not a step away from something inherently irreplaceable. So we lived in a society where fossil fuels weren't around, and there are ways for us to move towards a different society, but still have some of our conveniences and some of our great things that we have built up over the past couple of centuries. So it's all about visioning a positive future. We don't want to have a doom and gloom future. We want to envision where we can go in a positive light. And we want to envision a future where we're more socially connected, where we have more meaningful and satisfying lives, where our production and our consumption are closer to where we actually live, and where our long and fragile supply chains. So right now, we'll grow chickens in Chile, and then we'll ship them to China to fry them and freeze dry them, and we'll ship them back over to America so that you can put them in a McDonald's fryer and serve them to American consumers. And we want to shift away from that. And it's also where the total amount of energy consumed that we actually use in our society is lessened. Because we have to remember that these fossil fuels, we need to conserve them so that future generations can have the ability to use them. They're really condensed energy that's never going to come back if we use them all. So one way that we can do this is through relocalization. We can start building local production of food, energy, and goods, which, when we're introducing each other, we're all kind of working our own ways about relocalizing our food, but we also need to start thinking about energy and other goods. We can locally develop our own currency and really influence our local government and increase our culture locally by interacting socially. We can reduce our consumption while still improving our lives and the environment. We can also try and develop a really strong community bond, something that's kind of been lost in America as we've moved into the suburbs and towards these bubble lives, where you're in a bubble of your house with the air conditioning, to your bubble of the car with the air conditioning, to the bubble of the work with the air conditioning, and then all backwards from there. And so it's kind of like a hamster wheel. And we're trying to get away from the hamster wheel into the driving wheel. So we take our way of living and we're more living the way that we would like to live. And so Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, says you start at your nose and you work your way out from there. So we have to work from the individually transitioning ourselves, and then work on our households, making our households as energy efficient, producing food around our homes, maybe making cottage industries in our houses. And then from there we can move on to the community, because it's only when you established yourself can you even go to the next step. I know me personally, I've kind of gone the opposite way. I've kind of gone out to the community and say, hey, we need to go green. But meanwhile, my energy bill keeps going up, and my food, I'm still going to Publix, or I'm still going to grocery stores for my food. I'm not getting it out of my yard. So I've learned over these past couple of years it's really best to start from where you're at. And it's not going to be that you're producing everything from your household. No one can do that. And it's why we need community. Why we need, one person growing tomatoes and another person growing peppers, and you can combine them and make some really nice salsa.
Indeed.
So it starts with that shift in consciousness, thinking that smaller is better instead of, that nice big plasma 60-inch screen TV. Maybe, you don't need that. Maybe you need something a lot less simpler. And it's about, Stacy actually wrote this up, and I think it's really great. It's not about human beings or human havings, but about being human doings. And moving away from materialism, understanding what you really want and taking it upon yourself to have a little voluntary simplicity, trying to kind of take out some of the stuff that you don't really need in your life. And then consider the consumption and obsessions that you have. Like I work at a restaurant and I hear one of my coworkers, she talks about how, she's so stressed, so the first thing she goes is the mall. And she's so stressed because she has all these bills. Yeah. But if she just paid her bills instead of going out and using that money that she just worked for on buying more stuff to relieve her stress, that would probably be a better way of doing it. So taking on this voluntary simplicity in our own lives is important. I kind of feel like I'm probably preaching to a choir already. But stop living on debt. We're all living on debt in our society. I even have a credit card. I'm paying off some stuff. But, if we get away from debt and living on our own budget, and start getting back into this mentality that we need to save our money and to invest it into things that, have productive means. Maybe investing in our community, investing in our home to be more energy efficient. Connect and honor with nature. I personally, I go out as often as I can, walks around my neighborhood, getting to know my neighborhood, getting to know the forest around, getting to know my neighbors, trying to reconnect with that. Which goes on to the next one, getting to know your neighbors, getting out there and connecting with them. And this can't start from like the community level. This has to start from within you. If you're not willing to go to your next door neighbor and talk to them, then we can't go to our community and start talking to them. We have to start from where we're at. And also helping the less fortunate. I'm going to go on later on and talk about how we're working at Habitat for Humanity. I'd like to have us start developing programs for the unemployed and underemployed. I was recently reading an article in St. Pete Times. Right now, there's 131,000 people unemployed in the Tampa Bay area. And you could add up Clearwater and other small towns, and it would still be a larger amount of people that are unemployed than the people that are living in those cities. We have a lot of people that are unemployed, and if we can kind of teach them how to be more self-reliant, then maybe we can make a difference in that, and maybe make them have their own jobs by working at homes. So it's about building resilient neighborhoods. I'm trying to take upon what I'm talking about to you folks right now in my own life, because for the longest time I've had a civic association in my neighborhood. I've never gone to it. So the past couple of weeks I've been going to my civic association, getting to know my neighbors. I just joined up as the Colonial Hills Civic Association, so I'm a member. And there's a board meeting on Monday, and I want to get involved with that. So it's about getting involved in your own neighborhood and showcasing what you're doing. And then all this is going to have effects when the things of peak oil and climate change and any financial instability. We have to start thinking about where we're living now. That way, when the time comes and these things affect us, we have that group of connected people that we can rely upon. And so the whole transition town approach is to build these connections and to kind of envision a positive future so that people can kind of come in and plug and play. You know, when you have a computer, you just plug in your mouse, or you plug in your camera and it automatically uploads, or you can start using it right away. That's the kind of mentality that we should have, is we want to form this in a way so that we can have projects that people can plug into. So, and lastly, we want to start thinking about how we can plan out as a community, how we can step down our energy use over time in an energy descent action plan. So, in a food crisis, where would you rather live? Would you rather live in a suburban lot, or would you rather live in a permaculture garden that has food in abundance everywhere? And I'm going to talk a lot later about this, about how we can start developing this. But this idea of living in a lawn, it just doesn't work anymore. And I think we're all starting to kind of be aware of that. And so it's about going back in time and looking at how our elders used to live. They never used to have just lawns around their house. If you look at some of the houses in the 1950s and 60s, they had gardens. They had orchards of fruit all around the yards. They didn't just have a bare open landscape. So it's about going backwards, but seeing the intelligence and the wisdom that our elders have. So some of the resiliency, we want to be resilient in case future shocks hit us. So a portion more, so some of these are indicators of what resiliency would look like. A percentage of our goods are manufactured within our local area. A percentage of our food consumed locally that was produced in a given area. So we want more of our food that's eaten to be produced within food feet or food miles rather than food thousands of miles. We want to have less parking space and more of that space used for productive land use instead of having all this concrete. Maybe we can use this concrete for an orchard or a community garden. We want more engagement and more relocalization work. We want to lower the amount of traffic on our roads. We want to have more locally owned businesses rather than corporately owned businesses. I think this is one is really nice one is, what are the percentage of, what are the number of 16-year-olds that are able to grow 10 different varieties of vegetables? something that we've lost in America is our ability to know about food. I was watching a show. It was called Food Revolution, and the gentleman, he's a chef. He came in with a basket full of vegetables, and he was asking little kids, "What is this?" And he was holding up radishes, and the kids were saying potatoes. Yeah. And he was holding up tomatoes, and the kids were saying, "Oh, that's apple." Sometimes we've gone so far away of our food systems, and we need to reteach our young kids how to eat and how to be more nutritious and how to grow food. So lastly, we want to start thinking about energy descent action plan. This is something that all transition initiatives, this is like what they do. For instance, this is the Transition Energy Descent Action Plan book that the Transition Town Totnes put out. And it's like a step-by-step guide of what they've planned over the next 30 years of how they're going to transition from where they are to where they would like to be as a community. And they're getting literally hundreds and hundreds of people involved in this. And they're starting to sprout up gardens all over the place in Totnes. Businesses are starting to form. There's a gentleman I saw on YouTube. He started his own taxi cab company using a 3-wheel vehicle he made himself, and he's filling it up with bioethanol that's being grown locally. And so this whole new business idea, it can emerge if we want it to. Everything is started from the consumer. If we demand something, new businesses will form to meet those demands. So as a community, we can come together and ask people to start these businesses, and then we can kind of help them. Just like the wheatgrass. Or starting up gardens in people's backyards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about permaculture. Permaculture is permanent agriculture, and it was still started by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. And permaculture is this idea of using ecology and biology as well as consciously designing abundance into the systems that you live within. So it goes back to that previous photo that I had of where would you want to live? Would you want to live in a desolate lawn, or do you want to live in an abundant garden? So it's about designing the systems not only around your home, but in businesses and in schools and in education, in anything, and designing abundance by using the principles that nature uses. And so it all starts with ethics, and it starts with care of the earth. We really want to focus on any design that we have to really take good care of the earth. And then secondly, we want to do care of people. We want to design systems that care for people rather than just profit. And then lastly, we want fair share. And it's all about understanding that the universe and nature that we live in is about abundance. It's not about scarcity. We need to understand that this abundance can be shared. And I'm going to go on and talk about later about how we've done that in our group. And in the permaculture flower, you can use permaculture in a lot of different areas. It's not just about gardening. You can use permaculture in building, with tools and technology, education and culture, health and spiritual well-being, finance and economics, and community governance and land tenure. And so I have on Code Green Community a tab about permaculture, and I list all these flowers, and I try and post different things I find that fit into those categories. So I try and give you examples of what you can do and what these flowers mean in regards to permaculture. So this is the phase about what we've been up to. There's a lot of group members here already, and this is kind of rehash of what we've been doing the past couple years. So we've been hosting regular meetings. Every second and fourth Thursdays, we've been doing a Gaia's Garden discussion group at the Habitat for Humanity off of Madison. And we're trying to get people involved to learn more about permaculture and then get involved in what we're doing at the Habitat for Humanity and each other's homes. And also, we have on the second Saturday of every month at the New Port Richey Library, where we're at right now, we host a regular meeting, and we're shifting from showing films to having these regular meetings where we're going to really focus on transition initiative here in the New Port Richey area. Because it's really about having communication and having a spot where we can communicate face to face.
What time are the guys' garden meeting?
Oh, they're at 7 o'clock on Thursdays, second and fourth Thursdays. And we have the regular meetings here at 1, but we have this space open around 12, so I'm thinking about hosting a pre-meeting for people that want to be more on the steering group for our transition initiative. We want to start developing visual, practical projects. This is a picture of the Angelus that Richard just came back from. And Barbie, did you just come back
We
from?
didn't go today.
Oh.
Stacy called me with a headache. We canceled it, and I called Richard. So we didn't go up there this morning.
Well, we
But
did a perma-blitz on the Angelus in January of this year. We've also been doing perma-blitzes that I'll talk about later on. But the whole idea is we want to have visualization so people can see what we're talking about. Because sometimes you talk and no one knows what you're talking about. But if they can see it, they can understand it better. So for the past year, here in this room actually, we've been showing films. These are just a couple of snippets. We've shown Fresh, Food Inc., Home, Ingredients, Fighting Goliath, Homegrown Revolution. We've been showing films here, but now we're starting to shift to showing films at Habitat for Humanity. We want to start up local work groups. We have this small group of people that really have been spearheading this and taking on projects. But what we really need to start going is a group of people that are on the steering group that are pushing transition in New Port Richey. But underneath those groups, that steering group, are going to be work groups that are working on specific subjects, such as art and culture, our economy, our food systems, our health systems, our energy, our transportation. Like, for example, one of our last film showings here was Who Killed the Electric Car? We had someone show up that actually had an electric car, and he took us out, and he showed us how he converted his regular gasoline truck into an electric truck. And so he has a co-op that he's trying to form. So if we can connect and collaborate with him, we can have a group of people that are working on developing ways for our transportation to move towards sustainable ways of transport. And so by having these different groups working on different subjects, we can kind of divvy up the tasks a little bit better and actually accomplish stuff. So also at West Pasco Habitat for Humanity, we've been showing these socially conscious films. They've been just starting up in the past 2 months, and it's freed up these Saturdays from showing films to actually having discussions, and we're going to start doing open spaces here and really focusing on transition initiative. So this happens every first and third Thursdays at 7:30. This is a map that Stacy put together. Stacy has been mapping all the local farmers markets around Tampa Bay area. So we can work on resource mapping. Where are the fruit trees in New Port Richey? I don't know, but maybe we could make a map and we could show people where these fruit trees are so that they can know and they can find them and they can harvest out of them. I know when I go for walks around my neighborhood, I see orange trees that are just dropping with citrus, and I know that's something that's useful and that's being productive. It's a yield that we can utilize. So by mapping these resources, we know where they are and we can utilize them.
You know, these food bags only want canned food.
Yeah.
So if you have extra food, you say, gee, my tree is full. Can somebody come pick it? They go, what, are you nuts?
Yeah.
You know, that's supposed to be for poor people. They should eat just canned. Mm-hmm. People would probably be glad that we went around picking their fruit for them. They can better harvest the following year.
Well, this goes.
Yeah.
Well, this goes down to the next thing I was wanting to talk about is we want to foster community sharing of food. We want to develop programs, and I think we're already doing that with some of the projects that we've been starting. We've been starting up perma-blitzes, and we've kind of taken a hiatus, but I'd like us to start developing them again in this year, where we've been hosting perma-blitzes. There's Donna. And then, yeah, it's kind of not kind of bright, and Pam. And we've been doing permaculture method called sheet mulching, where we layer cardboard and compost and mulch and then seaweed, and we layer them in layers, and then we let them decompose and plant plants in them. And then we always try and have food around, because if you've got food, people are always there. So we host a potluck during these permablitzes, and it's a great way for us to kind of collaborate and connect and share our cooking skills. So again, we want to share. We want community sharing. We want to work on food security with the permablitzes and starting up the community garden and Habitat for Humanity, so we can get people involved. And that idea of plug and play, get people involved right away. We want to raise awareness with these movies. We want to start up ideas of how we can do Earth Days and radio appearances. I was on WMNF, the sustainability show, and I've been starting up my own media pretty much. I have the YouTubes that I record, and I've been trying to start up a radio station on a weekly basis at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. And I want to start doing these projects so that we can get the word out and get the awareness out of what we're doing, and how other groups of people can start doing it in their town. We want to do education. We want to do reskills and workshops. Sharing. These are different things that are already available that we can work with and develop, like the car share and free cycle groups. And then policy. We want to work on policies within the New Port Richey area to ban GMOs, to really focus on how chickens, if we can get chickens in the local area. And we always honor and engage the elders. We always have a few people that maybe they can't pick up a shovel or a pitchfork, but they can work in different areas and help us in different areas. And it's all about honoring the elders, and that's something that in the Transition Initiative they talk about, because these are the people that communicate our culture. And in our old society, we would have our grandparents raising the younger children, but now we put the younger children into preschool, and then the grandparents go into retirement homes. And so we need to re-engage that cultural link of communication. There's no way that things are going to get passed on to the younger generation if the older generation don't interact with the younger generation. That's what happened in our old society. We need to re-engage that. So what would we like to do from here? Political action. This is kind of a personal thing. I actually got a fee in the mail saying that I can't own chickens, because I had a rooster for about a month. I had baby chickens, and they developed into roosters. There's no real good way of looking under the skirt to find out whether it's a male or female. So I found out the hard way when it started crowing in the morning, and I got this in the mail. And we want to be responsible. We want to make sure that we have it in a responsible way with hens, but we should start looking at ways that we can have backyard chickens. Or another thing that's been popping up is a local food ordinance, so that we can make sure that our local New Port Richey area and Pasco County, we can preserve the right to grow our food. There are some areas right now, they will go in and they will shut you down if you try and grow food. This is like a necessity. This is a right that we need to work on making and ensuring that it will be there for the future. And it goes again with the genetically modified organisms. If you have just in the wind pollen blowing around and it's going into your garden in the back, does that mean that that corporation has the right to your products and your food?
Yeah.
That's what we learned while we were doing these Food Inc. and other films. We were learning
Mendocino
about.
County did it.
Mhm.
They have an ordinance against
Maine just did it, I found.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up in here. Is because this is something that we should develop as a group.
I sent that article that I sent you to the mayor of New Port Richey.
Yeah.
So you've got to do this.
And so this also goes on to, we want to work on developing political action for renewable sources of energy. When I was unemployed for a while, I got an opportunity to go to a discussion where Progress Energy was trying to raise the rates of electricity so that they could raise money for their nuclear power plants. So it needs to fall on local groups that are really willing to stretch it out there, that they want political action towards renewable sources of energy and not towards more fossil fuels and more energy that's reliant on mining and destroying the environment. Don't say never, because it's always a small group of dedicated people that change the world.
Well, you may be able to change it, but you're not going to get, you know, if they want to put the electric company in charge of you controlling how much electric you use, that's like the most insane thing. Because the more electric you use, the more money they make.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out how not to use it.
That's what I think.
Well, it's going to be a
But you
mix.
can't depend on the electric company to give you a hand.
Well,
No.
it's not going to be. I'm not saying that we should go out and riot. I'm just saying that we need to have working groups of people that are really caring about this and start to develop a real conscious effort towards developing these policies for our government. We need to lead our government. The government doesn't lead us. We need to lead them. That's how our mentality needs to be.
No,
So
I
if-
understand the government, but you're talking about corporations, and
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not going to go along with that. You could put up your own solar, maybe get off the grid,
Mhm.
but the electric company isn't going to make it easy for you. If you want to put solar on your house, they want you to have $100,000 worth of insurance connected to their grid.
Yeah.
Well, keep it.
I didn't know that.
At
Well,
least
this-
with Lacouche, where
Well,
I
this
am.
is why I'm saying that this is something that we need to work on. I'm not saying we're going to do it overnight.
I'm just saying they put up a net metering law so that you can't connect to the grid because they didn't want you to connect in the first place. But then they put up all these barriers to make it
Yeah.
not.
Well,
Not sensible.
the whole reason why we have in America this political system is it's for the people and by the people. But the people aren't coming together. There aren't groups of people working on this in local areas. So as a group, we need to work on it locally and work with the groups that are working on a state and federal level. So if we can work on it locally here in Newport Richey or in Holiday or in Clearwater, and we have a whole mass of people that are working on it, and the politicians know that we care adamantly about it, we will move some laws. I'm not saying we're going to change it overnight. I'm saying that we need to start focusing on it and start looking at it. And that's why I said that we can work in different work groups on this project. Because I don't know much about energy, but I know about gardening. But I know people that know a lot about energy, so if they can work and we can work together, there are things that we can do.
Oh, there's a lot of things that we could do.
Well, I'm just going to move on. All right.
Oh, please do.
Develop a local food guide. This is something that's Transition Sarasota has been doing. They've been having a food guide where all your local farms are, your local farmers markets, groups of people that are working on projects where you can get local food. I think that's something that we can kind of promote and put together as a group, and it would be a way to kind of get people involved. Develop a local currency. This is something that can help as in the short term with ideas of time banks where you can use your volunteer hours and you can trade your volunteer hours for someone else's volunteer hours, but it can slowly begin to develop into a local currency, such as in Ithaca, New York. They have a local currency where all the local shops use this currency, and you can use it just like a regular dollar. And also, a local currency started in Berkshires. Berkshires? Okay, yeah. So Berkshires are the same idea, the local currency, where you can have this currency and it's equivalent to a dollar, and you can trade it. And so the whole idea of this is building resilience, but also helping our local businesses. Because you won't use those local dollars at Walmart. You'll only be using them at these local businesses. And so you're going to be feeding these local businesses. But also, when people hear about these local currencies, they want to be a part of it. Because they understand they understand the idea and the methodology about it, but there's nothing in place. So we want to build the project so people can plug and play and get involved. People are more willing to get and purchase local currency than they are to start up a local currency. So as a group, we start this process up, we can get people involved. And this is also something if there was ever a problem with the United States American dollar, we could use this locally to help prepare resilience and to still use trade and barter. Local transportation. This goes again to what I was talking about with the local electric car co-op. If we can work on our local transportation, there aren't a lot of bike paths in Pasco County. We can work on that, getting bike paths at least, so you can ride your bike to anywhere in Pasco. In Pinellas County, there's bike paths everywhere. You have the Pinellas Trail that you can go from North Pinellas all the way down to almost St. Petersburg. So there's no reason why, as a group, we can't develop local transportation and thinking about that. And again, the biggest thing right now, I think, is a high-speed rail system. Why aren't we working on getting it back? You know, this is not done. I'm not going to give up. I want a high-speed rail system. We need some.
You need a high-speed rail that goes from Tampa to Orlando?
Yeah, it's a
Or
start.
can go to
It's a start.
Disney World?
Well, it's a start. It's a start towards investing towards something bigger. Because I don't feel that this car culture that we have is going to continue. We need to start developing ways of looking at alternatives. It might not be overnight. Like I'm saying, we can start talking and discussing about this and working on alternatives. It could be buses. It could be personal, private corporations working on taxi cab services that are more high-tech or use more energy-efficient hybrids instead of gas-guzzling cars. It's about thinking about this. It's about consciously designing it.
In Berkeley, back in the 60s, there used to be a group called the Provos, and they had about, I don't know how many hundreds of bikes, but people were just like, they would leave them tied up on the street, and if you needed a bike, you get on the bike, take it to wherever you're going, park it. Might or might not be there when you get out, because somebody would take it somewhere else where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
All over San Francisco. It was pretty interesting. For a while.
And so the other thing that we're kind of working on, and this is happening all over the Tampa Bay area, is the idea of reskilling. We've lost a lot. Like I said, with the kids, some of these kids, they don't even know the vegetables and different things that they're using. I don't know what that is. Is that a hair dryer? So the idea of reskilling is we can relearn some of the skills that we've lost, like preserving food and raising bees or raising fish, tilapia. So these are some of the ideas of workshops. There's a lady that's doing Kefir workshops where you can learn about natural soda. She's also doing soap making, natural cleaning. If we can start developing these workshops, it's a way for certain people to make a living doing these workshops, but also for all of us to start implementing it into our lives to kind of use less resources. Raising chickens, using herbs, milking goats, candle making, making rain barrels. And then we also can start looking at doing field trips and garden tours. We can start looking at some of the gardens that we've developed with the permablitzes that we've done. Maybe go back to them a year after, and so we can have tours of them and people can see what we're doing. We can go to Jim Kovaleski's, always a popular trip for most of the people. If you want to know about permaculture, we always send them to Jim Kovaleski's house because he's got it set up. And so if we can start developing this and having field trips to different projects around. Then what's coming up in May, there's a garden challenge with 350.org. May 14th and 15th, they're asking for people all around the world to start a garden up and take pictures and take videos and share it on their website. And I think this would be something that we can start working on. And there's also other things that we can work on, such as Earth Day that's coming up in April. There are projects that we can be working on right now. And the cheerful disclaimer, and this goes back to some of your objections. And this is all experiment. This is all a social experiment. But if we don't try, if we don't actually get together and start conversing about this stuff, then nothing's going to occur. So I really welcome all of your ideas and your thoughts, because sometimes some people have already done this, so we can learn from them, and we can learn some of the roadblocks that other people have had. But it is all just an experiment that we're trying. And I would like for all of you, if you haven't, to join Co-Green Community. I think most of you already have, so I thank you. This is the end of the presentation. Then I want to go on about what is Transition New Port Richey, how we can create resilient, sustainable communities, relocalization, a little bit about permaculture and what we've been up to the past year and a half, and what we would like to do from here. So the situation, right now it seems like all the problems in the world, they just keep adding up and they're adding up and they keep on becoming more and more complex, whether it's energy or the economy or this or that. But really, all the solutions that we need are embarrassingly simple. So one of the biggest things that I foresee is the energy transition that we're undergoing. The challenges of global climate change kind of give us the necessity to move away from fossil fuels. And then peak oil is the end of suburbia, and he was trying to wonder how you could use permaculture to kind of work as a community towards transitioning away from fossil fuels. And he developed this handbook. And it's a grassroots movement. It's all over the globe right now. There's one probably the next local transition group is in Sarasota, and there are other groups that are trying to form. There's one in Clearwater. I know a gentleman that's trying to start one. There's one in Tampa. There's a discussion group in Seminole. I'm trying to eke them towards going towards a transition group. There's other groups that are trying to form as well that are interested in this. So I feel that if we can focus on getting Transition New Port Richey, we can kind of show them how they can do it in their towns. So this is Rob. Well, I just want to start off by saying Transition New Port Richey started about in 2008 when I started Co-Green Community. I learned about the transition movement and I wanted to start one up here. So these are our two different websites that we have. We have one group website on Co-Green Community, and we also have a meetup.com. I started that up trying to get more people involved. And I think, having just a strictly group just for our group would be helpful too. Because Co-Green Community is more for all of Tampa Bay, and I want to focus strictly on New Port Richey today and talk about what we've been doing. So this is our overview. I'm going to talk a little bit very shortly about this situation that we're in. Bob Hawkins' quote, I'll just kind of read it. I believe that a low-energy, more localized future in which we move from being consumers to being producer-consumers, where food, energy, and other essentials are locally produced, local economies are strengthened, and we have learned to live more within our means, is a step towards something extraordinary, not a step away from something inherently irreplaceable. So we lived in a society where fossil fuels weren't around, and there are ways for us to move towards a different society, but still have some of our conveniences and some of our great things that we have built up over the past couple of centuries. So it's all about visioning a positive future. We don't want to have a doom and gloom future. We want to envision where we can go. Talks about how it's inevitable that we will be moving away from fossil fuels, and this energy transition is occurring over the next 10, 20 years. This is not going to be a short thing. It's going to be something that we're going to be living through. And then what both of these try and tell us is that the only way forward is for us to be proactive and engage in this and really look at how we can reduce our fossil fuel use. And transition initiatives give us a way of doing that as a community. So what is Transition New Port Richey? It started by me reading this book, the Transition Handbook, written by Rob Hopkins, who started Transition Town Totnes, which is in the United Kingdom. And he is a permaculture designer that he was showing to his students